The moment I opened the suitcase, I swear the room got colder. It was an old thing, cracked leather, stiff with age, tied shut with a fraying rope that looked like it had held secrets longer than I'd been alive. My name was on the note, just 5 words in my grandfather's tight handwriting. For Claire. Read alone. That was it. No instructions, no explanation. Just that. I should have been grieving. Everyone else was still upstairs, sipping weak coffee and passing around memories of Harold Whitmore, the quiet librarian, the doting grandfather, the keeper of books and bedtime stories. But all I could think about was the heaviness in my hands. Not just the weight of the suitcase, but something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet. I took it to the basement, away from the noise. My heart pounded as I untied the rope and slowly lifted the lid. Dust rose in a cloud. Inside were dozens of envelopes, stacked in uneven bundles, their paper yellowed, their ink faded but still legible. Every one of them was addressed to Harold Whitmore, each in the same elegant cursive. The return address chilled me. Rosemont Sanitarium, Clinton County, New York. The earliest postmark I could see was 1951. The latest, 1973. 22 years of letters. None of them had been opened. I sat on the floor, hands trembling, and slid the first envelope from the bundle. I don't know why I picked that one. Maybe because it was near the top. Maybe because I couldn't breathe until I started. The paper crackled as I unfolded it. The letter was dated April 4th, 1951. My dearest Harold, I dreamt of you again last night. You were standing at the gate, calling my name. But the nurses wouldn't let me near. I screamed and screamed, but you didn't hear me. I woke up in tears, clutching the blanket like it was your coat. Please, if you still love me, if any part of you remembers what we had, write me back. Tell me how our baby is. Tell me if she has your eyes. I miss you. I miss us. The name at the bottom of the page was Evelyn. That's when I knew I had walked into something I wasn't ready for. My grandfather had never mentioned an Evelyn. Not once. And as far as I knew, my grandmother, the woman in the black and white wedding photos hanging in the hallway, was his one and only. They'd married in 1954, had my mother in 1956. But Evelyn's letter was dated 3 years earlier, and she was talking about a baby. I read another. And another. With every line my stomach turned. Evelyn had been his wife. She said they'd married in secret after college. She wrote about their little apartment near campus, how they used to dance to jazz records on the fire escape, how they cried with joy when she found out she was pregnant. But then, it all changed. She said Harold's father, my great-grandfather, the so-called pillar of our family, had found out, and instead of accepting their love, he had her institutionalized. They say I'm unstable, that I'm hysterical. But I know it's just because I wouldn't give up our child. I wouldn't disappear quietly. Your father promised me I'd never see you again, and so far he's kept that promise. But I write these letters hoping, begging, that one day you'll open them, that you'll remember I exist. I felt sick. This wasn't just some sad love story lost to time. This was a deliberate erasure, a cover-up, a woman forced into silence, a child hidden away, and a man, my grandfather, who never even opened her letters. Or so I thought. When I finally emerged from the basement hours later, the sun was gone and the house had grown quiet. I didn't say anything that night. I just kept reading, page after page, year after year, watching Evelyn's hope fade. Her words grew darker, lonelier. She begged for answers. She pleaded for news of the baby. She even asked once if she had imagined everything, if the love they shared had been a lie. But then something strange happened. Somewhere around the late 1960s, her letters changed tone. She didn't sound desperate anymore. She sounded resigned, as if she had accepted her fate. Yet she still wrote. Not every week, not even every month. But she wrote, "I'm not writing this for you anymore," she said in one letter. "I'm writing because this is all I have. My words. My truth. Maybe someday someone will read them. Maybe your daughter or your granddaughter. Maybe someone braver than you. That letter hit me like a punch in the gut. I couldn't sleep that night. Couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn. About the baby. About my grandfather, who had kept all of these letters but never opened them. Why? Guilt, remorse, punishment. The next morning I confronted my mother. I told her about the suitcase, about Evelyn, about the child born in 1952. At first she waved it off, said it sounded like fantasy, like some tragic mix-up. But when I showed her the letters, and the return address, and the descriptions Evelyn gave of the Whitmore estate in the early 1950s, something in her face changed. She turned pale. Her hands trembled. She looked at me and said, "I always knew there was something off about Dad. He was too quiet, too haunted. But this is something else." And then, without another word, she went upstairs. I stood in the kitchen holding a life that had been buried in a box for 50 years. I had no idea then that the letters were just the beginning. The next morning my mother handed me a manila envelope. It had no name, no markings, just an old faded stamp and a small tear at the edge. "I found this in Dad's office once, when I was a teenager," she said, her voice brittle. I asked him what it was, and he said it was nothing. He got angry, it scared me. So I put it back and never mentioned it again. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official court document, yellowed with age. My eyes scanned the words like I was reading in a dream. Case number 40293, involuntary commitment. Evelyn Margaret Whitmore. Date, June 2nd, 1952. I don't know what shook me more, the confirmation that Evelyn existed, or the fact that she had his last name. They were really married. My grandfather had a whole life before the one we knew, and we had been fed a version of history scrubbed clean of it. I spent the next 3 weeks diving into records, archives, anything I could get my hands on. I combed through digitized newspapers, court files buried in state libraries, even obscure genealogical databases. What I found still haunts me. Evelyn hadn't just been committed, she had fought it. She'd testified in court that she wasn't unstable, that she was being silenced. But her testimony didn't matter. The judge had sided with her father-in-law, citing concerns for her emotional well-being and the future welfare of the unborn child. The institution she was sent to, Rosemont Sanitarium, had a reputation, quiet, off the grid, and well-connected. The kind of place where inconvenient women went to disappear. I discovered there had been a child, a baby girl, born July 1952. The birth certificate was there in the dusty state archives, nearly unreadable from age. The child's name was listed as Baby Girl Whitmore. No first name, no mother's signature. Just the note. Custody transferred. Guardian, Maryfield Adoption Services. My breath caught in my throat. This girl, my aunt, if Evelyn was telling the truth, had been taken away, renamed, raised by strangers, and erased from the family. And all this time, she had no idea who she was. I thought I would scream. I thought I would cry. But instead I just sat in silence, the weight of all those decades pressing down on my shoulders. I needed to know why. Why my grandfather never responded to Evelyn. Why he let it happen. And more than that, why he kept the letters. If he was so ashamed, so determined to hide it, why keep them at all? I didn't find the answer until I returned to the suitcase one last time. There was something odd about the lining, a bulge beneath the fabric. I peeled it back carefully and found a smaller envelope, tucked deep into the base of the suitcase like it was never meant to be discovered. It was sealed with wax, dark red, cracked and fragile, and had my name on it. Just Claire. Inside was a letter, my grandfather's handwriting, neat, steady but with small tremors that made the ink waver ever so slightly. Claire, if you're reading this, then I've already left this world. I don't know if I ever earned the right to explain myself, but I owe you the truth. I was a coward. I was young. I was weak. I let my father scare me into believing Evelyn was dangerous. I let him convince me that our love was a phase. When she became pregnant, I panicked. I let them take her away. I didn't even fight. I told myself it was for the best, that she would get help, that the child would have a better life. But I never stopped thinking about her, or the baby. I never stopped wondering if they were safe, if they were happy. I couldn't bring myself to open her letters. Every time I tried, I froze. The guilt was too much, but I couldn't throw them away either. I carried them with me because I deserved the weight of them. I couldn't fix what I destroyed. But maybe you can. If you find her, if she's still out there, tell her I'm sorry, and tell her I loved her. I always did. I read it twice. Then again. Then I just sat there staring at the ink as if it could speak to me. All I could think was, why now? Why me? I hired a private investigator 2 days later. His name was Martin Sloan. Ex-cop. Quiet. Efficient. He didn't ask many questions. Just took the documents I gave him, nodded, and said he'd get to work. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't want to raise false hope. I didn't even know what I was hoping for myself. Weeks passed. Then months. I started to think it was a dead end. That maybe baby girl Whitmore had grown up and died, never knowing the truth. That maybe she had moved on, made a life, buried the past. I was starting to let go, slowly, painfully, when the call came. Martin's voice was calm, but I could hear something new in it. Satisfaction, maybe, or reverence. I found her, he said. I couldn't speak. She's alive. She's in Maine. Goes by Eleanor Graves now. 73 years old. She has kids, grandkids, retired schoolteacher. I still couldn't speak. My heart was hammering so loudly I could barely hear him. I didn't tell her anything, he added. That's your story to tell. I thanked him. Then I sat on my porch for what felt like an hour, staring into nothing. How do you reach out to someone who has no idea you exist? How do you tell them their entire life was built on a lie? I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there with the letter from my grandfather spread out on the kitchen table, the edges curling slightly like they were alive, like they could feel the weight of the words they held. Every few minutes I'd read another sentence, trying to hear his voice behind it, trying to imagine the man who raised me writing it. Not the quiet, cardigan-wearing grandfather I had loved, but the scared, flawed boy he had once been. The next morning I drafted an email. It took 3 hours. I wrote, deleted, rewrote. I kept the tone simple, nothing dramatic or cryptic, just a few lines. My name is Claire Whitmore. I believe I may be a relative of yours. I have something important I'd like to share with you if you're open to hearing it. No pressure, just hoping we can talk. I debated attaching a photo of the birth certificate or the suitcase, but it felt too abrupt. I needed to give her the choice. I hit send and immediately regretted it. What if I was wrong? What if she never responded? What if she did? And hated me for it. The reply came 5 days later. I must have read it a dozen times. Hello, Claire. I admit I was surprised to hear from you. I don't know how we could be related, but I'm open to hearing more. I'm a little cautious, understandably, I think. But something in your message felt sincere. So okay, let's talk. Eleanor. My hands were shaking. I sent her another message, explaining everything in careful detail. My grandfather, the letters, Evelyn, the records. I offered to send scans of the documents. I didn't try to tell her who she was. I just gave her the pieces and said, "This is what I found. You can decide what to do with it." 3 days passed. Then came the longest message I've ever received. She wrote that her adoptive parents had been kind but distant. She had always felt like something was missing, like there was a story behind her birth no one had told her. She had asked questions as a teenager but got vague answers. Your mother wasn't well. Or, it was complicated. She was told she'd been left at a hospital by a woman who couldn't care for her. But even as a child, she never believed that version. She said she had always wondered why she felt borrowed in her own life. Then she wrote something that stopped my heart. I always assumed I was abandoned. But now, reading your message, I think I was stolen. She asked if we could talk on the phone, just once, to hear my voice. She wanted to know more, but not from a screen. The call lasted 2 hours. We both cried within 5 minutes. She had so many questions. About Harold, about Evelyn, About the letters. I told her everything. I read her some of Evelyn's words, trying not to let my voice crack. I told her about the letter my grandfather had written to me, about how he had carried that guilt for 50 years. I didn't try to defend him. I couldn't. But I also didn't want her to think he had forgotten her, because he hadn't. And when I finished, she said quietly, "I think I've waited my whole life for someone to tell me I was wanted." That was the moment I lost it. I sat in my living room sobbing, feeling the weight of 3 generations crash down on me. She had lived a good life, she said, but a life with questions. And now, even if the answers were painful, they were hers. 2 weeks later, I drove to meet her. It was a quiet Sunday in Maine, the kind of cool autumn day where the wind smells like pine and smoke. Her house was small, cozy. There were pumpkins on the porch and wind chimes in the tree. I sat in the car for 10 minutes before I could make myself knock, and then she opened the door. It was like looking at a photo that had faded, then been restored. Her eyes, our eyes, were the same, a kind of steely gray that always looked like it was holding back some unspoken thought. She smiled, and I smiled back, and for a second we didn't say anything. We just looked at each other, like we were trying to memorize a face we'd never seen before but already knew. She hugged me, and it wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was warm and long and steady, like family. We sat in her kitchen drinking tea for hours. I showed her the suitcase, the letters, the documents. She read every letter slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. She whispered her mother's name again and again, like it was a spell she had finally remembered how to say. And when she finished the last letter, she didn't curse Harold. She didn't scream, or rage, or collapse. She just sat there and said, "She really loved him, didn't she?" And I nodded, because there was nothing else to say. She didn't ask for revenge. She didn't demand reparations. She just wanted the truth. And now she had it. But the story didn't end there, because a week later she called me again, her voice quiet and serious. "There's something you should see," she said. "Something I found in my old things. A box I never opened. I think it belonged to Evelyn." I froze. "What's in it?" "I don't know yet," she whispered, "but it's heavy." The next morning I was back in my car before the sun came up. I couldn't wait. My mind was racing with possibilities. What could Evelyn have left behind? More letters? Photos? Some piece of herself that had survived the years in silence? Eleanor met me at the door again, this time holding a worn cardboard box with both hands, like it was something sacred. She didn't say anything as she handed it to me, just motioned for me to follow her inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where, just days ago, we had unsealed decades of forgotten grief. Now we were about to do it again. The box wasn't locked, but the lid was heavy with time. Inside were stacks of paper, a few black and white photographs curled at the edges, and a small notebook with a faded red cover. On top of everything was a single folded piece of linen, embroidered with the initials EW and the year 1951. A baby blanket. Eleanor reached for it slowly, her fingers trembling. She held it against her chest for a long time, then carefully placed it aside. The photos were haunting. One showed Evelyn as a young woman, barely 20, smiling under the shade of a large oak tree. Her eyes were so alive, so bright, it hurt to look at her. Another photo was of Harold, shockingly young, sitting on the hood of an old car with Evelyn beside him. His arm was around her shoulders. They looked happy, in love, like any other couple before the world made things impossible. But it was the notebook that truly shook me. Evelyn had filled its pages with diary entries, starting the day after she was admitted into the sanitarium. The handwriting was neat at first, then gradually more erratic. Like time and isolation had frayed her mind. But what struck me was her clarity. She wasn't delusional. She wasn't unstable. She was angry, desperate, heartbroken. She wrote about the day she was taken from her home, about Harold's father arriving at her door with 2 suited men and a document she was told to sign. When she refused, they used force. She remembered screaming Harold's name, begging him to come. She had believed, until the very last second, that he would stop them. He never did. She wrote about the birth, the baby, Eleanor, being taken from her before she could even hold her properly, about the nurse who whispered, "She's healthy," and then was gone. The most painful entry read, "I still write him letters. I don't know why. He doesn't answer. Maybe he never will. But if I stop writing, then it's like none of this happened. And I can't let that be true. I need him to know I existed. That she existed." Eleanor read in silence, her hand covering her mouth, her shoulders stiff. I could feel the storm building inside her, but she didn't let it out. Not then. "I always thought she just gave me up," she said finally, her voice hollow. "I thought she didn't want me. She fought for you," I said. "Every day, even when no one listened." We sat with that truth for a long time. Later that afternoon, Eleanor showed me a drawer filled with things she had never understood. A lock of hair in a wax envelope, a hospital bracelet with a name scratched out, clues she'd found over the years but never connected. Now it all made sense. We spent the rest of the day piecing together Evelyn's story, like two historians reconstructing a lost civilization. But as night fell and the house grew quiet, something changed in Eleanor's face. She grew distant. Her eyes wandered. Finally, she said, "There's something else. Something I haven't told you." I braced myself. "What is it?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, ivory-handled key. "I found this hidden in the lining of the box. I think it belonged to Evelyn. There's a storage facility listed on this old receipt." She unfolded a yellowed piece of paper. "It's in Albany, and the date on this, it's from 1973. The same year the letters stopped." My stomach dropped. The last letter Evelyn sent was in 1973, the year she vanished from every record. No death certificate, no obituary, just silence. "What do you think's in there?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I don't know," she said, eyes locked on mine. "But I think we're meant to find out." 2 days later, we drove to Albany together. The storage unit was in an aging facility, the kind where fluorescent lights hum and the hallways smell like damp cardboard. The man at the desk raised an eyebrow when we gave him the number and the receipt. "This one hasn't been accessed in, well, decades," he said. "I'm surprised the lock even still works." He handed us a clipboard to sign, then led us down a long, cold hallway. We stopped in front of a rusted metal door. The number 207 was barely visible under a layer of grime. Eleanor slipped the key into the lock. It turned with a loud click. Inside was a single wooden trunk. We opened it. What we found inside shattered everything we thought we knew about the story. The trunk creaked open slowly, the hinges groaning like they hadn't moved in decades. A thick layer of dust puffed into the air, and for a moment we just stared at the contents, too overwhelmed to touch anything. There were no gold bars or stacks of money, no dramatic confessions written in blood, but somehow what we found was even heavier. On top lay a stack of papers, neatly bundled with twine. Below that, dozens of photographs, each wrapped in tissue, as if someone had handled them with reverence. And beneath it all, another notebook, larger this time, leather-bound, its pages worn from frequent handling. We started with the photos. Each one showed a child, a little girl, no more than 5 or 6 in the earliest pictures, then older, 8, 10, 12, always the same bright eyes and gap-toothed smile. But there was no label, no date, just the silent documentation of a growing girl. "Who is she?" I asked, already knowing the question wouldn't have an easy answer. Eleanor didn't reply at first. She picked up a photo of the girl standing in front of a school bus, her small backpack slung over both shoulders, and turned it over. On the back, a single name had been written in delicate script, Marion. It wasn't Eleanor, that much was clear. The timeline didn't match, and the resemblance, though faint, wasn't strong enough. The papers were next. Adoption records, custody petitions, Letters from social workers, court transcripts, all copies, but organized meticulously. I skimmed the top page and felt a chill run down my back. The child, Marion, had been placed with a private family in 1958. The biological mother, listed as Evelyn Whitmore, had been declared emotionally unfit for continued care due to her mental health history. But tucked between the lines, buried beneath the clinical language, was the truth. Evelyn had gotten out. Somehow, she had been released from the sanitarium, and she had tried again. She had had another daughter, and they took her too. I looked at Eleanor, her face now blank with shock. She was gripping the table edge with both hands. She didn't stop, she whispered. They locked her away, took me from her, and she still tried again. The leather-bound journal was Evelyn's final record, but this one was different. Less frantic, more determined. Her tone had changed, still grieving, still aching, but also fierce, defiant. In one passage she wrote, "They told me I was broken, that I'd imagined it all, that Harold had never loved me, that my child was better off without me. But I remember the way he held my hand when we eloped, the way he smiled when we chose her name. And I remember the silence, the letters I sent, the answers I never got." In another, "When Marion was born, I thought maybe fate was giving me a second chance. I didn't know they'd find me again. I didn't know they'd already marked me as unfit. By the time the ink dried, she was gone. But I will find her. I don't care how long it takes. I will not leave this world without her knowing the truth." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. This wasn't just a tragic love story anymore. It wasn't just about Harold's silence or a wealthy family's cruelty. It was about erasure, control, a woman who had fought against a system designed to make her disappear. Eleanor was quiet, lost in thought, until finally she said, "Do you think Marion is still alive?" I nodded. If these records are right, she'd be in her 60s now, and Evelyn was trying to find her. Maybe she got close. We went through the rest of the trunk. School report cards, scribbled notes, even a drawing signed, "Marion, age 9. It wasn't just a box of memories. It was a trail. Evelyn had been keeping track, searching, hoping. Every document was a breadcrumb, and Evelyn's last journal entry stopped me cold. I've written to Harold again. This time not to beg or plead, but to tell him what they did. That we had another daughter. That she's gone now too. If he ever reads this, I hope he finally feels what I felt for all these years. And if not, Claire, maybe one day you will. Maybe you'll be the one to understand. I don't know you, but I know you exist. You're part of this, even if you don't realize it yet. Please, if you ever find this, don't let the silence win. She knew. She knew about me. It hit me so hard I nearly dropped the journal. Evelyn had never met me, never even knew if Harold had told anyone about her. But she hoped. She left this for someone, anyone, who might care enough to finish what she started. And now it was me. I looked at Eleanor, who had tears streaming down her cheeks again, and I said the words that would change everything. "We have to find Marion." Eleanor just nodded. No hesitation, no fear. We didn't know how. We didn't even know where to start. But somewhere out there was a woman who had no idea that her life had been rewritten by a lie. And we were going to bring her the truth. Finding someone who had essentially been erased from public records over half a century ago wasn't easy. Even with modern tools and a private investigator already on our side, we were working with fragments. Most of what we had were photocopies and handwritten notes Evelyn had pieced together herself. Names of towns, references to orphanage transitions, a few blurred photographs. There were no clear surnames, no confirmed adoptive parents, no updated addresses. Still, we started, and when I say we, I mean it. Eleanor was with me every step of the way. She didn't retreat into her life or vanish into denial, the way some people might have. She was furious. Furious for her mother. for the sister she never got to grow up with, and for the silence that had blanketed their lives like a funeral shroud. That fury drove her. Our private investigator, Jordan, focused on adoption agency records from the late 1950s and early 60s. With a court order and a ton of red tape, we got access to an archived file from a now-defunct agency in New York. The file was thin, just a page and a half, and most of the identifying information had been redacted. But one name jumped out: Marion Grace Weller. It wasn't much, but the name, paired with Evelyn's own notes referencing a Mrs. Weller in 1962, was enough to stir something inside me. From there, we began building a digital trail. Property records, marriage certificates, anything that could connect us to someone named Marion Weller, or someone who used to be Marion Weller. After a week of dead ends, Jordan finally hit on something. A woman by that name, born 1958, who had lived in 3 different counties across Maine. The last trace: a mortgage signed in 2002 under a new name, Marion Campbell. I stared at that screen for a long time, heart pounding. Campbell. It meant she'd married, started a family maybe, built a life. I couldn't even begin to imagine what kind of life. Did she know she was adopted? Had she spent her whole childhood wondering why she didn't look like her parents? Or had she been raised in the illusion that everything was normal? Was she happy, broken, suspicious, grateful, and more than anything, would she even want to know the truth? We drove up to Maine that weekend. Eleanor insisted on coming. She said it wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about confronting what had been taken from them both. As we drove, she told me about the feelings she'd grown up with. A quiet ache, like something had always been missing. She said her adoptive parents had been kind, but distant, never quite able to explain why she never felt rooted. Hearing her speak like that only fueled the determination inside me. Marion deserved to know she wasn't the only one left behind. When we arrived, we didn't knock on a door right away. We drove by first, parked across the street from a modest yellow house with wind chimes swaying in the breeze. It looked peaceful. Garden beds, a painted fence, a porch swing. Someone had poured love into that place. We waited. Then, around 4 in the afternoon, a woman came out with a basket of laundry. I held my breath. She was older now, of course. Mid-60s, gray hair pulled back in a clip, wire-frame glasses, soft lines around her eyes. But the moment I saw her, I understood what Evelyn must have seen when she looked into that tiny baby's face. She looked exactly like her. Eleanor leaned forward, both hands trembling. "That's her," she said softly. "Oh my God, that's my sister." We sat in silence as Marion clipped laundry to the line, humming to herself. It felt surreal, like watching a dream from behind glass. And then we did what anyone in our position would have done. We argued about what to do. Eleanor wanted to walk up right then, knock, explain everything, bring Marion into the fold. She said there was no point waiting. Life had stolen enough time already. But I wasn't so sure. We had no idea what this woman had been told her whole life. We didn't know if her adoptive family had lied, or simply hadn't known the truth themselves. Dumping everything on her doorstep in one emotional ambush felt dangerous. In the end, we compromised. I wrote a letter. I kept it simple. I told her my name. I told her a little about Harold Whitmore, and Evelyn, and the decades of silence. I didn't overload her. I just said I believed we might be connected through something long buried, and that I wanted to give her the choice to reach out if she was open to it. I left my contact information, sealed the envelope, walked up the steps with shaking hands, and left it in her mailbox. We drove back to the hotel in silence. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking my phone over and over, rereading the letter in my head, wondering if I'd said too much or not enough. Then, around 3:17 a.m., I got a text. Just 5 words. "I think I need answers." I stared at the screen, barely able to breathe. It was her, Marion. And with that one message, decades of secrets began to shift. I met Marion a week after that message. She didn't want to meet at her house. She chose a quiet cafe near the coast. Neutral ground, as she put it. I don't know what I expected. A tearful reunion, an angry confrontation. But what I found was a woman with quiet fire in her eyes, and a voice that trembled with controlled emotion. She had read the letter I left. Then she'd gone online, searched names, dates, and slowly connected the pieces. She didn't know the whole truth. Not until I gave her the letters. Every single one. We sat there for nearly 2 hours while she read them in silence, her fingers brushing the edges like they might disintegrate in her hands. And when she was done, she didn't cry. She closed the last envelope and whispered, "They made her disappear, like she was a stain." I nodded, because what else could I say? It was Marion who pushed us forward. She wanted justice, not for herself, but for Evelyn, for Eleanor, for the truth. And honestly, so did I. With Marion's consent, we digitized the letters and handed them to a local journalist in Vermont. She specialized in historical investigations and had already heard whispers of the Whitmore family legacy. Old money, buried scandals, philanthropic lies. She was eager and meticulous. She pulled every string she could. Court records, property transactions, sanitarium logs, personal testimonies from former staff who still remembered the girl they locked away. She built a timeline so airtight, even the ghost of my great-grandfather couldn't wriggle out of it. When the article went live, it spread like wildfire. Heir to Whitmore legacy, hid secret wife and daughter for decades. Sanitarium scandal unearthed after discovery of letters. The backlash was swift. Charities began withdrawing from partnerships with the Whitmore Foundation. Buildings named after my great-grandfather were quietly stripped of plaques. A scholarship in his name was paused, pending review. For a man who once prided himself on reputation, his legacy was now scorched beyond repair. And the current trustees, my uncles, my mother's cousins, all of them smug gatekeepers of the Whitmore name, they panicked. You see, part of the estate's wealth came from a trust set up by my great-grandfather, and buried deep in the documents was a clause. If new heirs were found, legitimate heirs, they had legal claim. Eleanor and Marion filed suit. My mother, for once, didn't object. She had seen the letters herself. She had lived in the shadow of Harold's regret for too long. And now, as the truth clawed its way into the open, she finally stepped aside. The court battle wasn't short. It took almost a year, but the judge ruled in favor of Eleanor and Marion. They were both officially recognized as Harold Whitmore's daughters, one by birth, one by blood, both by truth. Half the estate was redistributed. Trusts were restructured. Properties sold. My mother's cousins, they lost their control, their money, and, worst of all for them, their name's prestige. I still remember the look on Franklin Whitmore's face. Harold's nephew, the one who had always talked down to my mother, sneered at me during family gatherings. He looked like a man watching the floor collapse beneath him. "This is an outrage!" He spat as reporters swarmed. But no one cared what he thought anymore. He faded into obscurity, just another relic of a legacy built on lies. And as for me, I didn't take a cent, not from the trust, not from the legal fees. I refused to profit off the pain of those letters. But I did gain something else, something better. Family. Eleanor and Marion see each other every week now. They talk like sisters who never missed a moment, making up for lost birthdays, decades of silence, and everything that could have been. I see them often, too. We laugh now. We cry sometimes. We heal. And the farmhouse, the one where Harold spent his final years, haunted by what he'd done. I donated it to a local women's shelter. It was renovated and renamed Evelyn House, a place of refuge, safety, and second chances. Sometimes I still dream of Evelyn, not as the woman in the photographs, but as a ghost sitting beside Harold as he tied that suitcase closed. I wonder if, in those final days, he knew I'd do what he never could. Maybe that was his redemption. Maybe that was his punishment. Either way, I carried out his final request. I found her. I told her she was loved. And as for the rest of them, they lost everything they worshipped: status, Legacy, money. The world saw them for what they were, cowards in suits hiding behind a family crest. And now, when they walk into rooms, no one whispers about their wealth. They whisper about the woman who came back from the shadows and the granddaughter who dragged the truth into the light.